Gonzalo Gomez. He's a senior researcher at the IESE Business School. Gonzalo, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Now, we're expecting the results in the next hour, hour and a half. What are you expecting? How many cajas will have to be nationalized?
Well, we will see that. It's still too early to say it, but the thing is that Cajas recapitalization process has been quite positive. In 2007, we had like 43 cajas, and we expect to have 15, around 15 when this process is over. So I think that the recapitalization and the merging and acquisition process has been quite positive, and I still wait, not big surprises with the results, but I think that it is too early to say it yet.
So we had, what, some 43 cajas just 3 years ago. Now we have about 17, 18. Again, I know it's difficult to predict, but if I speak to you in 2 years, is it going to be 2 or 3, or will they all be merged into one bank, which seems to be maybe a better solution for Spain, because at least they'll have to, the government will help keep an eye on them?
I think that the best process would have been if the cajas could have turned into regular banks from the very beginning. This would have helped a lot in order to have a market recapitalization and a market merger and acquisition process. But the problem that we have had is that the cajas are too political directed, and the process has been a little slower than expected, and may have some problems because of that, because of the political weight that they have, and they could have create problems to them in order to make this process faster and more efficient.
And the stress tests are credible enough? I know we've had a lot of market concern about the stress tests overall. For example, their exposure to Greece remains. We still don't know exactly how much of a cut private creditors have to put in case of a default of Greece. Do you think that the Cajas would be able to sustain a bigger haircut?
Well, there are two things about the stress tests. First of all, Spain attended the stress test with most of the financial system, with all the institutions, and the results were quite positive because only 5 institutions needed to be recapitalized at that moment, and the process of recapitalizing them was already started, so it was quite positive results. And I think that the exposure to Greece, possible Greece default, and to the sovereign debt problems, I think that in Spain may be lower than in other countries like Germany or France, where actually the stress tests were not so clear than in the Spanish case. So I think that it may have problems, of course. The IMF said that the losses from this sovereign debt crisis may be around 300 billion, and of course the Spanish banks and Cajas may have problems with that. But I still think that the results will not be so negative. I think that the financial system is still sound in Spain.
But so how much pain can actually a lot of these cajas and the banks actually take? Let's say that from the 21% haircut on Greek debt in case of a default, we go up to 50%. Would the cajas be able to survive then?
I hope so, and I think so. I think that the Bank of Spain is quite doing a very good job, and they will be preparing a solution for those cajas having problems, and probably if it's needed, they will recapitalize and they will allow them to merge with banks, which is something that is not in the usual behavior in this kind of process of mergers and acquisition. And I think that the problem won't be so big for these cajas.
And Gonzalo, I know you're a believer that actually the Cajas have made a lot of progress. So do you think it's unfair that they can't survive in the current state without getting either taken over by a bigger bank or being nationalized?
I think so. I think that the best solution would be to transform these cajas into regular banks. I have already said it, and I think that it should be done this way, because that way this political influence would be lower, and the process of merging with a bank or being acquired by a bank would be easier, and with always market criteria and not political criteria. And I think this is something very important. I think that although the process has been quite positive, as I have already said, in terms of reduction of entities, this would have been perfect if it had already done, and it should be done anyway.
All right, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Gonzalo Gomez there, senior researcher at the IESE Business School.